welcome to Book to Bestseller TV. Today we are here with Ginger Moran. She is a writer and a novel and a memoir coach, so we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. For her biography, she's a teacher, a published writer, and a single mom of 2 boys. Her areas of expertise are in fiction and creative nonfiction, editing, coaching, and creative survival. I love how that sounds. We're gonna talk about that. She holds a PhD from the University of Houston in literature and creative writing, and bachelor's and master's degrees in English from the University of Virginia. She is published in Salon.com, Oxford American, Literary Mama, the Virginia Quarterly Review, Feminist Studies, and other journals. The Algebra of Snow was nominated for a Pushcart Editor's Choice Award. She has written 5 novels, a collection of essays about her years as a single working mom, and a nonfiction book on custody. She taught at Spring Hill College, Fisk University, the University of Virginia, and James Madison University. Currently, she coaches promising writers who want to write good novels and memoirs. So, Ginger, welcome, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so thrilled to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we've got to dive right into it and find out what you mean by creative survival.
Well, so there are kind of hints in my list of publications, I suppose. I started off on a kind of regular path, sort of, with getting my PhD, and I set off on a career path. Although I might point out that there was a little bit of insanity right at the very beginning. I got my PhD in the morning, got married that afternoon. We moved the next week to my first academic job. And I had my first child that first academic year. And then the second one came 18 months later. So you could say I did things just a little bit crazily then. But I got another academic job, moved to Nashville. I started off in Mobile, Alabama, and moved to Nashville. And sometime in there, my now ex-husband left, and I ended up with a tenure-track job, the 2 kids, the house payments, the whole thing. So that became a challenge I hadn't exactly bargained on, but there's a lot of great material in it. So
right. So that does sound like you've kind of been through the ringer. So of course, when you do go through that, you end up with a lot of stuff to use, shall we say.
For sure. You definitely have a lot of stuff to use. I was already a writer. My first novel, The Algebra of Snow, is actually my dissertation that I just cleaned up and sold as a novel later on. But I got tons of other material. A lot of the essays that I've published come from my years as a single working mom. In fact, my collection is called Thank God It's Monday, because it was always such a relief to go back to work, where my office was tidy and my assistant actually did what I told her, which did not always happen at home. I adore my sons, who are now grown, but there were some wild years there. So there are a lot of my essays are, some are a little bit dark, some are pretty funny. There was the one that's in Salon was about, I had my kids play every sport known to man just to wear them out. That was my whole goal, was to wear them out before I went down. If I stood for 2 seconds after they'd gone to bed, I had won that day. But I had them play every sport known to man, and I fell in love with every single one of their coaches. So it was just like totally helpless falling in love with them. So that is, that's what that Salon piece is. But no matter how inappropriate, how much we had nothing in common, I was totally gone with every single T-ball, basketball, swimming, you name it. Fell for them all.
So funny. So, okay, so this begs the question, it's how did you manage to maintain your writing schedule, or how did you write when you had obviously so much to do? And those sporting activities, they take up a lot of time, even for the parent, especially for the parent.
Especially for the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So, those years were actually, when I look back on them, of course, it's easy to look back in the past and say, they were kind of great years. It's wonderful when your kids are young. It's a lot of fun, and you're meeting other parents, and, your house is always full, and there was actually a lot of fun in there too. But I was working full time. Later on, I was also taking care of my dying father. So I have an essay in conjunctions about living with an 8 and 9-year-old boys and an 89-year-old boy. So it was all pretty wild. But I set what I call aerobic writing goals very early. I actually started this graduate school even before all the things got really intense. And that is, I just set a goal of writing 2 pages a day. And I get up really, really early. I still do to this day. And I write semi-conscious. I actually have an essay in Literary Mama about sneaking past my children's doors so that they wouldn't know Mom was awake. So I could just get in my 2 pages. But, if you write 2 pages a day, you'll have a book by the end of the year. So, lots of people try to write fast. They try to write 6,000 words. It's like, 500 is doable and it's sustainable. So I learned very early to set small, achievable goals so I could feel good about it.
Right.
So, yeah, that just worked.
Okay, so you have the writing habit that Stephen King has is very, very similar, where it's a daily, have to do it no matter what sort of practice. I think that's fantastic. Okay, so let's transition over into coaching for other writers. How have you taken your own knowledge of writing and your education and your habits? How do you help other writers with their maybe their writer's block, or just an inability to get it on the page? How do you do that?
So I have lots of tricks and techniques, and one of the main things that I have to offer people is that I've tried them all on myself. So I have, I say, like Thomas Edison, I have not failed. I have discovered 1,200 things that don't work. So I've tried everything out. So I use myself always as a guinea pig. I had a PhD. I was a practicing writer. I knew lots of writers. And I was very familiar myself with all those internal blocks, all those limiting beliefs that get in your way. And there's no writing in habit in the world that's going to get you past that. So I actually, before I started coaching full time, I've been teaching creative writing in universities. I actually got life coach certification with Martha Beck. She's the life coach who writes a column for O Magazine. And she's really funny, which is like one of my top values. So she writes these really funny columns. So I liked her a lot. I just liked her attitude. So I got certified as a Martha Beck life coach. And then I also got Kaizen Muse creativity coach training before I started doing it full time. So, people can have a great book inside them. And if they can't find workarounds for those obstacles that are just so normal, all those fears, is this any good? Am I a natural? All of those, I don't have the time, all of that. There are ways to challenge those limiting beliefs, and it really pays to get into the habit of challenging those when they come up. So I learned a bunch of techniques to deal with those.
Yeah, I can see that being super useful in other areas of life too, because the whole entire creative process, or really anytime you want to do anything of significance, you're always going to run into blocks of some kind. So I can see that being very helpful. So I checked out your blog before our talk today, and you have some information there about confidence. And I like what you
Yep.
said there. Confidence is one of the requirements for writing and publishing a book. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that might apply to some of the writers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. The farther I've gone into this, the more I've worked with people, the more I've, taught students, the more I know about myself. It is a long game. It is a long game. If you want to write a book and you want to succeed, a lot of the people that I talk to don't just want to write one book, they want to be a writer. They want to be in that, have that experience of living as a writer. And that is a really long game. I often quote Chaucer, who says, life is short, the craft so long to learn. Our life is shorter than it'll take for us to really, feel absolutely, totally, 100% sure of what we're doing. I really become convinced that the most important thing is to keep hope alive. To just really find ways to nurture that in yourself, because there's so much stuff coming from the outside that's discouraging. It's not easy, but like anything in life that is truly deeply satisfying and rewarding, like, getting a degree or having a great career or raising kids really well, or, whatever it is in life, none of those are easy, but they are deeply, deeply satisfying. And that, to me, to me, that has really become the number one challenge, is to maintain that faith and keep going forward. So when I have a group program in novel memoir writing, the top thing that I'm hoping to help them capture and nurture is confidence, is hope. And I really have a multi-purpose, multi-technique way of approaching that, including physical. To me, like, physical fitness feeds into that. Nutrition, sufficient sleep, water. It's a physical, mental, and spiritual experience being a writer. So you pretty much have to go all in.
Ah. Honestly, you said all that, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's just like being a business owner. It's just
it absolutely is.
Kind of have to be top of your game all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was an academic for most of my career. I've only been an entrepreneur and a book coach for a few years. And I have just found it, in the olden days, people would have, said to me, oh, that's so materialistic, and who wants to be in business? We're all artsy, right? But I love being an entrepreneur because it is so challenging. It's always interesting. There's always something else to learn. So I know for a lot of writers, we love learning. And so it's just never ending. So.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so let's get to your book. Your book is called The Algebra of Snow, and I think that's a fascinating title. You want to tell us a little bit about the storyline there?
Yeah. So here's a show and tell.
Very good.
So actually, the cover of it, my brother designed for me, which was very cool. You can't see it here, but they're actually algebraic equations up in the trees, in the snowy trees. So yeah, just finding the title for the book was a real experience. I really wish I had all the pages and pages I went through writing some really terrible titles. I mean, they were just really, really, really bad. So that's another thing. You have to just tolerate a lot of really bad stuff before you get to the good thing, because it took me forever to get to what I think is I love the title. It has really been interesting to me over time. The Algebra of Snow. It actually started as a short story, which I call it The Algebra of Snow, and it actually is a really good example of write what you don't know. I know lots of people say write what you know. I actually wrote a whole lot of stuff that I don't know. The main character, and there is only one character. There's one character and two dogs. in the book. So one of my challenges was how to sustain a whole novel with one character who's alone in the Adirondack Mountains in winter, so not very much happens. It's like, how do you take out most of the stuff that sustains novels and have it remain interesting? She is a mathematician. So I have never been in the Adirondacks in winter. I have no idea what that's like, and I cannot add. So it was those were really interesting things. Luckily, I was in the university while I was writing it, so I actually had a mathematician on my dissertation committee, and he reviewed it to make sure I hadn't really messed up the world of mathematics. But I loved playing with that metaphor. I loved the language of mathematics. So I just loved using that as a metaphor. So it's a kind of interesting combination of her kind of descent into her own mind and into her memories, into her past in this really cold place. And her memories are pretty cold. So the outside world, the place, is very much like her inner world. So it's a kind of psychological thriller, sort of, in that tradition of Margaret Atwood's Surfacing, or some of Doris Lessing's novels, where, will she come out of this? So even though not much happens, I've had a lot of people tell me that it actually functions as a kind of thriller because you don't know. But so yeah, that's where that came from.
Okay, so I asked for 3 top benefits that your book provides to your readers. So the first one was how to structure a novel. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have taken all of my many, many years of training, education, experience as a professor, experience as a writer, and now experience as a coach, and kind of boiled them down into some fundamentals that I call the 4 Ps, one of which is plot. And I use the good old Freytag's pyramid as my plot model. So this actually came from Aristotle's Poetics. It's really that old-fashioned, you start with an inciting incident, you tell the backstory, then you have rising action. I complicate what is the kind of classical rising action with moving the character arc back and forth. Across that rising action. Then the climax is not the most exciting part of the book. It's the part where things get decided. My perfect example of that is Hamlet's The Readiness is All. It's when he commits. He's been going back and forth. Did this really happen? What am I going to do? And when he commits to action, that is actually the climax. So everything that happens from there is following action. And then there's the denouement, the nodding, and the resolution. And, that the reason that it's been around a long time is because it just works. So my book pretty much follows it, really that same model. And when I am writing my own books now, I chart out those points in the book. They can change as I'm writing that discovery draft, but I make sure that they have that because it then creates the tension. And any book has to have tension. Any book has to be solving a problem. It has to be a problem at the beginning that is getting solved through this being moved progressively through points.
Okay, so that leads me to a really different sort of question, because one of the things you coach about is how to write a memoir. So I'm thinking with a memoir, you also have to have some sort of conflict and some sort of resolution. Otherwise, why bother, right?
It's absolutely true. Yeah. So as I said, what I've learned from all these many years of doing this is that in that world of immensely complex craft and craft information and teaching, there really are some pretty simple principles that are always at work. And it's actually even true of how-to books. How-to books are solving a problem. And they have to move through that resolution of the problem just as much. But people writing memoirs often don't think about that when they start out. They don't think there has to be a problem. It's the hook. And if you don't have it, people are going to just wander away. I have worked with a lot of people who have just a wonderful story. It's really charmingly told. The voice is wonderful. The language is just marvelous. But if you don't have that hook, that, something went wrong. I think all books are mysteries. I'm a total mystery nut. But I see mystery in all books, is that there is a problem at the beginning that you work your way through and reach a resolution by the end.
Very cool. That, you've kind of simplified that in my head, and I think that's got to be one of your brilliances. I don't even know if that's a word, but like one of the things that you bring to your clients that probably a whole lot of other book coaches don't, is that you're giving them information in a way that is easy to understand, and all of a sudden those little pieces start to fall into place. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I take that as a huge compliment. Thank you.
You betcha. Okay, so let's go to the second point that your book brings. It creates a powerful central character. So can you tell us about how to write a powerful character that, maybe has some nuance, or, that nobody's all good, nobody's all bad. So tell us about how to do that.
Yeah, so that's just an absolutely excellent point. So I'm glad that you mentioned that up front, is that it is really important for the character to be complex. Memoir can't be about how great you are. You have to reveal your vulnerabilities. And the great memoirs, the ones that like Love Warrior, you really see her guts, and I often tell people, they often don't want to say bad things about other people, or they don't want to reveal their own vulnerabilities. And I actually have a blog post that people have loved called, Can You Make This Worse? It's like, can you go deeper with the pain here? And you have to be careful with that, because sometimes there are truly painful stories, and you have to exercise great self-care when you go back to remember that. But, people, one of my best examples of somebody who does that really well with memoir is Anne Lamott, who really spills the beans about herself. She goes really deep with her own vulnerability, and she lets us really know her, and, with all of her stupidities and, limitations. And it just makes us like her that much more, or it does for me. And I know she has lots and lots of fans. So it's the vulnerability that's really engaging. The other thing that I think is really important in terms of creating a strong character is to have an outer conflict and an inner conflict at the same time. And my best example of this are the Jason Bourne, like the very first Jason Bourne movie, when he is floating face down in the North Sea with a bullet in him, and he can't remember who he is. You have an outer conflict, he's floating face down in the North Sea with a bullet in it, and how they found him, we'll never know. But anyway, he gets rescued. But then what goes along with that outer conflict is his inner conflict, that he doesn't know who he is. And once he finds out who he is, he realizes he's an assassin, but he doesn't want to be one anymore. And then you have the whole spy thing unfolding after that, with them trying to kill him trying to survive, and so on. So that is a great example of somebody whose identity has caused him outer conflicts. And that's like a perfect marriage of the two. But you do always want to have that inner conflict, like my character is exploring her icy past, the loss of her mother when she was a child, in this threatening, cold winter environment. So that's if you can get them both going at the same time, you can have some real magic.
Yeah. Okay, so you segued perfectly into the next point, and that is using the setting to establish an internal state of being, as you've said it. So I've not really noticed when this has been done in other work, but I think it's a really fascinating way to bring to say, hey, this is a mirror of this, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that people don't. So my novel is a good example of that in ways that I've already talked about. But I think people often forget to really paint the place in all of its complexity, because very often the conflict, whether it's how to memoir or novel, comes from what I call place, which is a word that I use to describe the entire world, the entire context. And again, with how to memoir and novels, you always have to create that world. You have to do that world building thing. You have to create the context, what caused the problem. So in novels and in memoirs in particular, I teach people how to look at all the different parts of it, not just the place where it's actually physically happening, but the time period, the historical moment, the obviously the setting, but also the class, the education levels, that whole world of what the region, all of that, the religion, all of that is part of the world and the understandings of the world. Like, I think Marilyn Robinson does an absolutely stupendous job of having novels that are so place-based. So the world of her novels is very much informing the limitations and opportunities for the characters. They're really interwoven. They couldn't happen anywhere else. It's part and parcel of who they are, of their identity. So again, people with memoir, they think, oh, I can say, this took place in Sacramento and everybody's going to understand that. It's like, well, no, you have to tell us, you have to build Sacramento for us. Or in the world of how to, it's like, why is this a problem? You build us that world. What makes this a problem? People don't automatically think, oh, I'm really worried about, such and such. I mean, sometimes you do. But in order to really hook your reader, you're going to have to create that context and create an urgency in order to carry them forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the most masterful ways that I've seen somebody fully paint a picture has been George R.R. Martin in his books. I mean, it's just completely, everything he's thought of everything. And so,
Absolutely.
You're fully immersed in this new world. I think it's just fascinating.
Well, Harry Potter, I mean, she's just absolutely brilliant. She just, and the classic is Tolkien with the, Lord of the Rings. I mean, he drew maps. He had everything, it was so vivid for him. He could just take us there. So, yeah.
Even I think what all three of them have made up languages to go along with their worlds too, which is just like, wow,
absolutely. Yeah, and the hierarchies, the relationships, the political systems. But again, sometimes people don't think in those same terms when they're writing about, say, growing up in the South during civil rights. You're going to have to paint that world for us. You're going to have to paint that historical moment, just like Martin does.
Right.
You're going to have to bring that all back to us and talk about the relationships and the power. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Another one, Laura Ingalls Wilder, and her too. How fully she developed her entire world. And that has become our understanding of what that time frame was like.
That's exactly right.
It's just amazing. Fascinating, really. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that goes along with my claim is that we actually learn through story. That's our most powerful way of learning is through story. That's why how-to books are full of story. I'll give you an example. Because I mean, it's the reason, the Bible is so much written in parables,
Right.
that really is like, and this actually gets back to character. People often think that if they write characters that are very general, they're going to communicate to more people. When it's exactly the opposite. It's like the more particular the character, the more specific, and the deeper you go with those layers of relationship, power, control, values, the more you engage people. It's just a weird paradox, but people who are working on a book, I often have them go back and write all that backstory. It might not end up in there, but they need to know it. They need to know that all of those layers.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, there's just so much there, so much to
There's a
unwrap.
lot. Yeah. Well, it's really fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Fun. So, and a lot of it is just magical. So
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ask one last question, and then we'll talk about your free gift. So this last question kind of goes into the free gift. So what tips do you have to improve creativity just in general or for writing specifically?
So I would definitely say that the way to approach a creative project is to first draw set your goals really high, be really ambitious, dream big. Don't ever back away from that. Don't ever give up on that. What if J.K. Rowling had said, "Oh, I'll never make it"? We wouldn't have this whole world that has been really important to a lot of kids. Don't forget to dream big. I mean, people like her have really inspired us. And then just get really particular, go backwards from there and break it down into really small goals. The steps that you're going to take, the little daily routines to reach that goal, and make sure that, like, if you get stuck in there somewhere, if you are getting tired or worn out or you're feeling discouraged, break it down smaller. Don't keep pushing. Back up, break it down smaller. Take really good care of yourself. Get enough sleep. Sleep is absolutely critical to creativity. Give yourself enough space, and go smaller. Then there are the other things that we talked about before that just really have to do with the physicality of creating. You're creating in a body. You're in your body. So, really exercising conscious care of that. Nutrition, exercise, water, all of this really matter. So you're caring for the place where the creativity comes from.
I like it. I like it so much. Okay, so that's a beautiful lead-in to your free gift. You gave us a creativity checklist, and the link for that will be below the video in the show notes. So I'm excited to get my hands on that because I love anything that has to do with a checklist, and creativity is one of my most favorite things. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, super good.
And also your book link to your book on Amazon will be in the show notes as well, so people will be able to check that out.
Well, cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with me today. I've had so much fun getting to talk with you, and look forward to seeing more from you and from your clients in the future.
Thank you so very much. It was just an absolute pleasure and a delight.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.